Kent Hovind made this video seminar series on creationism, young Earth creationism, like years and years ago. I think 2003 maybe is when it came out. These things still hold up because all of these arguments are still being used today. So I wanted to go through some of these out of sheer interest and see what we could find, see if we can debunk some of it. So let's give this a watch and see what it has to say.
I was preaching in Denver one time, and some guys came and they said, Hovind, we know you teach the earth is only 6,000 years old. We'd like to prove to you you're wrong. Would you come with us, please? I said, sure. They took me to this big freezer in Denver, outside of Denver in Lakewood. It's the National Ice Core Laboratory. 36 below zero in there. They put this big suit on me, big hat, big gloves, big boots. I was freezing in 5 seconds when I walked in there. I got Florida blood, it's real thin.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think I know what he's about to talk about here, ice cores. So over the course of like a winter season or whatever, ice cores work similarly to tree rings, in the sense that like when it gets really, really cold out, the trees turn darker, I think. And when it gets warmer out, the tree turns lighter. And over, so many winter summer cycles like that, eventually what you get is a dark light cycle. You get a ring. You get a ring around the tree. And it works similarly with the ice cores. You can get basically rings in ice cores if you pull them out. If you pull the ice cores out, you can see the rings. And in the Antarctic or the Arctic, we can see hundreds of thousands of ice cores. That makes up for at least hundreds of thousands of years.
They said, Hovind, we go to Greenland and we drill holes through the ice. Government job. And
yeah, beautiful. This is him talking shit about the government as if, the dude is obsessed. He's like a sovereign citizen. He's obsessed with hating the government. He absolutely has to hate the government. It's ridiculous.
Take this big pipe, we drill it down in, and we bring this ice core out of the middle of the pipe, and we save it in this big freezer here in Lakewood, Colorado. We have 10 ice cores stored in this freezer. They said, they took me over and showed me one of the ice cores. They said, you see these rings on here? It looks like tree rings, dark, light, dark, light. I said, oh yeah, it's real clear. They said, well, what happens in the summer, the snow melts a little bit, and then it refreezes and makes clear ice. Shows up dark on the picture. In the winter, the snow just packs. It doesn't get a chance to melt. And so it shows up as a white layer.
That's correct. It's not exact. Some cycles happen a little bit faster than once a year, but yeah, that's correct.
So these layers represent summer, winter, summer, winter, summer, winter, summer, winter.
It averages out to about 1 per year, yes. Sometimes you get 2 per year, sometimes you get 0 per year, but yeah, generally it's 1 per year for the most part.
They said, now the deepest hole we've ever drilled is 10,000 feet deep. And we counted these ice rings, and there were 135,000 of them. And now you're going around telling everybody the earth is 6,000 years old. We can prove it's at least 135,000. I said, fellas, aren't you assuming those are annual rings?
Yes, it's reasonable to assume that there is about 1 per year. You'd have to have 175 cycles per year to account for 135,000 rings in these ice cores. It's completely ridiculous and unreasonable.
See, they didn't know about the Lost Squadron, apparently. But in World War II, some airplanes ran out of gas and landed in Greenland. Has anybody ever heard of the Lost Squadron? Okay.
Yeah, I think I heard about this. Didn't Kent make this up completely? Not the Lost Squadron necessarily, but didn't he make up this whole bit about how they found him under a bunch of snow core rings or something like that? I forget.
It's been on TV a bunch of times. Well, the airplanes got left there in 1942. They went on and fought the war. Everybody forgot about them until a rich millionaire from Kentucky got a brilliant idea. Go find those airplanes and bring them home. He went there looking for the airplanes. They had to use ground-penetrating radar to penetrate the ice, and they located the planes. They melted a hole to get down to a P-38. It was 263 feet below the surface. They melted this hole down to get to the plane, took the plane apart, and brought the pieces back up through the hole and put it back together in Middleborough, Kentucky.
If I've said this once, I've said it 1,000 times. Do not trust anything that Kent Hovind says without verifying it, because he has flat out, blatantly lied before.
The planes were in the ice for 48 years. They were 263 feet down. That's 5.5 feet a year. Now, the deepest hole they've ever drilled is 10,000 feet. You divide that by 5.5, you get 1,800 years.
Complete misrepresentation of the data that they found, and also very likely not even true. If you've been watching for any length of time, you'll know that Kent Hovind has a tendency to not just fudge the numbers, but completely change them. Like, completely change what the real numbers are.
Deeper layers get squished, called glacial firn. So really, 4,000 years is plenty of time to put all the ice at the North and South Pole. So why isn't there more ice at the North and South Pole? I visited the museum and saw the guy who dug out the airplane. His name is Bob Carden. I said, Bob, when you went down to get to that airplane, did you go through ice rings? He said, oh yeah, many hundreds of them. I said, now wait a minute. How can there be hundreds of ice rings in 48 years?
He's telling us what somebody told him about their experience somewhere else. None of this has been verified. He's not even claiming to have counted them. He's not claiming to have provided any kind of evidence of any sort. And aside from that, it is not exact. It's not 1 year per ice core layer. Just like it's not 1 year per tree ring. Not exactly, but it averages out to like 1.1 per year or something like that. I don't remember what the exact number is. But he needs that not quite exactly even number to be fudged to be like 175 rings per year at some point.
Shouldn't there be somewhere around 48? He said, who told you those are annual layers? He said, that doesn't represent summer, winter, summer, winter. It represents warm, cold, warm, cold, warm, cold.
That's correct, but it's extremes. It's extreme warm, extreme cold, long term, which usually adds up to about 1 per year, roughly. Winter, summer, winter, summer. It doesn't necessarily mean 1 year, but getting those types of rings and having those extremes, it would take like 175 serious winter-summer cycles per year. That's just not how it works.
You can get 5 of those in 1 week in Knoxville, can't you?
No. It has to be long-term cycles like that.
Yeah. But here's a guy still calling them annual layers. Now, either he's ignorant or he's lying. I hope he's just ignorant, because ignorance can be fixed. You see, stupid is forever, but ignorance can be fixed. That's the difference, by the way. A guy that works with the Eskimos said, Brother Hovind, I got 15 layers of snow on my...
You know, it's funny. I say that exact phrase about Kent Hovind all the time.
Fixed. You see, stupid is forever, but ignorance can be fixed. That's the difference, by the way. A guy that works with the Eskimos said, Brother Hovind, I got 15 layers of snow on my car in 8 hours. Not 15 inches, 15 distinct layers of snow.
Completely different situation. I mean, is he must know this. This brings up the question that he just asked. Is he lying? Or is he ignorant? Which one? Seriously. He must understand the difference. It's been explained to him too many times at this point.
No. You kids are going to be taught that each of the layers of the earth is a different age. They've got Cenozoic, Mesozoic, Paleozoic, Archaeozoic. Did you know the whole geologic column is baloney? It doesn't exist. We covered that on video 4.
Not true.
All over the world, petrified trees are found standing up, connecting these rock layers. Petrified tree connecting a bunch of layers can't be millions of years difference in the age of those layers. One in Cookeville, Tennessee, not far from here. The bottom is coalified, the center is petrified, the top is coalified again. Runs through 2 coal seams. Cover more on that on video 6 about coal formation. Mount St. Helens blew trees into Spirit Lake. They're going to petrify very quickly, standing up. That's the way they sank to the bottom. They got waterlogged.
He's trying to disprove the geologic column, quote unquote. It's well established and well understood by science. It's just nonsense.
Wood petrifies quickly. Here's petrified firewood. Here's a petrified fish giving birth. It does not take millions of years to give birth. Petrified cowboy boot with the cowboy's legs still in it. The article's on the table down here called the lime.
Is this one of those things where he claims that we can make oil in a laboratory all willy-nilly? Just make petroleum oil in a lab. I mean, it's super easy, barely an inconvenience. Just go into the lab, make some oil, and then sell it to whoever wants it. It's complete nonsense, dude. It doesn't work that way. It does, is in fact, take millions of years at least to make oil, or for oil to form. Same with this whole petrifying process. I don't know a whole lot about the process of petrifying, but I can tell you this. Aaron Ra has covered this in great depth. So if you're curious about how the petrification process works, go watch his breakdown of it. He does a fantastic job.
The Mississippi River is depositing sediments at the rate of 80,000 tons every hour. 80,000 tons of mud comes down and dumps off around New Orleans, and that delta is growing larger and larger. They studied the delta pretty carefully and say it probably took about 30,000 years to put all that mud out there in the delta. Okay, well then I have a question. If the Earth is millions of years old, why isn't the whole Gulf of Mexico full of mud by now? They'll say, Hovind, it's 30,000 years. That proves the Bible's wrong. The Bible says 6,000. I know, but see, I've got a theory about that. Here's my theory.
Is your theory based on science? Is your theory based on evidence or based in reality in any way at all? Or are you just making this shit up as you go? That's my real question.
I believe 6,000 years ago, God made everything. 4,400 years ago, there was a flood. As the flood water was running off, whoosh, about half of that mud washed out there in 20 minutes. So it looks like it took 30,000 years to get the mud out there. It took about 20 minutes.
All right, I'll tell you what. Why don't we just find that out? Let's look it up real quick. Hang on.
Mr. Ham and his followers have this remarkable view of a worldwide flood that somehow influenced everything that we observe in nature. A 500-foot wooden boat, 8 zookeepers for 14,000 individual animals, every land plant in the world underwater for a full year. I ask us all, is that really reasonable? You'll hear a lot about the Grand Canyon, I imagine, also, which is a remarkable place, and it has fossils. And the fossils in the Grand Canyon are found in layers. There is not a single place in the Grand Canyon where the fossils of one type of animal cross over into the fossils of another. In other words, when there was a big flood on the earth, you would expect drowning animals to swim up to a higher level. Not any one of them did.
If Bill Nye and I went to the Grand Canyon, we could agree that that's a Coconino sandstone in the Hermit Shale, and there's the boundary. They're sitting one on top of the other. We could agree on that, but we would disagree on how long it took to get there. But see, none of us saw the sandstone or the shale being laid down. There's a supposed 10 million year gap there, but
It doesn't matter if you've seen it or not. That's completely and totally 100% irrelevant. We have evidence to point to what happened. We don't have to physically be there to know what happened. We can look at the evidence to tell.
And then 4,400 years since then, okay? A friend of mine from Louisiana is a pastor of a church. He said, Brother Hovind, I used to work in the oil field, drilling in the Gulf of Mississippi, in the Gulf of Mexico, drilling for oil. He said, we drilled down through 14,000 feet of mud and hit trees 60 feet tall, standing up. 60-foot vertical.
Love how he's just given us a quote from some random dude that he knows and not giving us any solid evidence of anything that he's showing us or talking about here. No solid evidence to be found anywhere.
Trees under 14,000 feet of mud. More about that on video 6. Here's a picture of the oldest tree on the planet. It's called the bristlecone pine. We've got a piece of bristlecone in our museum in Pensacola. It's only 30 inches in diameter, and it's 700 years old. You can count the rings with a magnifying glass. Grow.
Oh, I thought rings weren't annual. Isn't that true? How can you tell it's 700 years old if the rings aren't annual?
It's real slow. Now, tree ring dating is not an exact science. Trees can produce 2 rings a year or 3 rings a year. Okay?
Can. Operative word being Can. It's not a normal circumstance. It's incredibly unusual to see that. It averages out to about 1 ring per year. It's the same with the ice cores. It averages out to about 1 per year.
And be very careful about tree ring dating with overlapping sequencing. We cover more on that during Q&A time if you'd like. But the oldest tree in the world, this textbook says, is 4,300 years old. First old.
No, I think it's a lot older than that, isn't it? Hang on, let me look this up. I'm pretty sure the oldest tree is like 10,000 years out. 10,000 years old. Yeah, okay. It's over 5,000. I thought it was older than that. I guess not. Interesting. It's the bristlecone pines, or it's the bristlecone pine, over 5,000 years old. Bill Nye, I have here evidence, fossils, etc. Kent Hovind, I have a guy who said, right? Exactly. Antarctic glass sponges take the title of oldest living animal with an estimated lifespan of 15,000 years. I think there's a type of tree that is considered the oldest living organism because it clones itself by like dropping a piece off or something like that, and then it's an exact clone, and it's this whole underground network of roots or something like that. Pretty interesting stuff, though. Anyway, let's keep listening to Hovind.
Oldest organism.
Whoa, hang on. Let me step back.
Q&A time if you'd like. But the oldest tree in the world, this textbook says, is 4,300 years old.
That's not accurate. It's over 5,000, as I said a minute ago. It's a bristlecone pine.
Earth's oldest organism. That's a pretty old tree. But I've got a question. If the Earth is millions of years old, why don't we have an older tree someplace? Why would the oldest tree be 4,300 years old?
I mean, the book said tree, oldest tree, not oldest organism necessarily. There are older organisms. There are older creatures, older things around. Doesn't mean, I mean, he's trying to imply here that the flood came along. You know what? Let's just listen to what he has to say. Let's let him just come out and say it, and then I'll debunk it.
I have a theory about that. Now, here's my theory. I believe about 6,000 years ago, God made everything, and 4,400 years ago, there was a flood. And so I predict the oldest tree ought to be somewhere around 4,300 years old.
Well, you're wrong. The oldest tree isn't around 4,300 years old. The oldest tree is over 5,000 years old, and the oldest organism is significantly older than that. Somebody said it in chat. It's a sponge with an estimated lifespan of 15,000 years, I believe. Clonal plant and fungal colonies. This is what I was talking about here. The Pando is a colonial colony of quaking aspens that is several thousand years old. Interesting. Let's see. King clone is an individual creosote bush in the Mojave Desert of Southern California, U.S., estimated at 11,700 years old. Another creosote bush has been said to be 12,150 years old, but this is yet to be confirmed. I'm looking for... Yeah, Pando is a clonal colony of Populus tremuloidus. Quaking aspen is what it translates to, I guess. Trees in south-central Utah, U.S., that's estimated to be several thousand years old, possibly as much as 14,000. Unlike many other clonal colonies, the above-ground trunks of these trees remain connected to each other by a single massive subterranean root system. And that's why it's considered a single organism. There are a ton of organisms alive today that we know are older than 4,000 or 5,000 years. Kent Hovind is simply making this up. Not only is he making up the fact that there are older organisms than the bristlecone pine, but he even made up the year or the age of the bristlecone pine. He said it was about 4,300 years old. It's not. It's over 5,000 years old. And that blows a hole right in his conspiracy theory about it being about as old as the flood. He completely made this up.
It is. Wow. Maybe that Bible's right, you know? Maybe you ought to read that thing and believe it.
Or maybe you made this up. That's a distinct possibility because that's not what any of it said. This is so incredibly wrong to me. Seriously. It seems to me, it appears as though he is intentionally setting out to deceive people here. He's setting out to trick people into believing something that is not true. It is like the lowest of the low thing to do.
Here's a picture of a coral reef. You know, the largest reef in the world's in Australia. I had a call from a church in Brisbane one time. They said, "Do you want to come preach over here in Australia?" I said, "I need to pray about this." He said, "Yes." I took my whole family over to Australia. My daughter and I got to go scuba diving at the Great Barrier Reef. It was incredible. Some of the reef was destroyed during World War II by ships and anchors and bombs and stuff like that. So the environmentalist wackos went out there to see how fast it grows back.
The environmentalist wackos? There are environmentalist wackos to try to see if, as you view it, God's creation grows back in a timely manner. They're out there destroying what you believe to be God's creation, and we're trying to repair it, and you're calling them environmentalist wackos? What is going through your head, Kent? For real?
They watched the reef grow for 20 years.
Okay.
It was a government project.
The government has environmentalist wackos? Give me a break, man. They didn't sit out there with a team watching it grow for 20 years. They take measurements every so often. I don't even know if it's true. He may be making this up too. He has a habit of doing that. It wouldn't surprise me to learn that there was a government project that wanted to know how long it takes for a coral reef to grow back, so they send people out there and they take measurements. But again, this dude has a long storied history of just making shit up right off the top of his head. Just coming out with false facts that have no basis in reality. It honestly blows my mind. He considers humans as the ones who are ordained to destroy what we can because it's God's command. What goes through this dude's head? Kent Hovind knows his audience will never fact check him. That's true. It takes 30 seconds to fact check like any one of these claims. I love the zero sources except the Bible, right? And some of the sources that he puts down are straight up like fake. They're fake sources. Like he just writes down the name of some magazine. There isn't even a guarantee the magazine he writes down even exists. The dude makes shit up regularly. It blows my mind. I got so upset I ran right into lava. It blows my mind, man. I'm telling you.
After watching it grow for 20 years, they said the reef is less than 4,200 years old. Okay, well then.
That's simply not true. He's just making things up once again.
I have a question. If the Earth is millions of years old, why don't we have a bigger reef someplace? Why on earth would the biggest reef be only 4,200 years old?
You know what? How big is the coral reef? Or how old? I'm sorry. How old is the coral reef? Let's see. Isn't the coral reef underwater anyways? The corals are 500 million years old and date back to the late Cambrian period. But that may be, yeah, that's a coral reef history. So I don't know what he's even talking about, 4,200 years old. What are you even talking about, Kent? Great Barrier Reef? It's significantly older than 4,200 years old. Look, he put a citation in here. Coral Reef Growth. Origins, Volume 6, Number 2, 1979, page 88 to 95. Okay, first of all, why is he citing something from 1979? That is really, really old. There should be some kind of updated information, first of all. Page 88 to 95. See also Creation ex Nihilo, Volume S, Number 1, page 6. I'll pass on anything with the word creation in it, but what is Origins? I don't think I've even heard of Origins. You know what? Let's look this up real fast, shall we? Let's just fact check his source. Because I honestly do not believe a word this guy says. Let's see. So his source says Origins, Volume 6, Number 2, 1979. Like, is there even a thing called Origins from this date and this volume? I'm not super sure. I'm just trying to look up his source here because he listed a source, and let me show you what I've got. I've got grisda.org. Let me switch screens so you guys can see too. Grisda.org. I have no idea what that is. Geoscience Research Institute. I have to imagine this is what he's talking about, right? The attitude of university students toward the teaching of creation and evolution in the schools. All right, so it looks like he specifically cites page 88 to 95. I mean, this is a creation magazine that we're reading from here, it seems like. I've never heard of Origins, but it's obviously a creation magazine. It's all about creationism. I'm not taking a creationist magazine as evidence that the Great Barrier Reef is 4,200 years old, man. You got to give me a little more than that. Let me just type the page number, page 88 to 95. Yeah, here. Center for Scientific Creation, number 64, Corals and Caves. Oh my God, dude, we're going down a real rabbit hole here. Okay, so this is another example of this citation being used, apparently. This isn't the citation itself. I'm having a lot of trouble finding this citation, honestly. That's totally unrelated. Unfortunately, I can't search for this in the normal places I would look for citations because it's not considered a scientific magazine, so I can't go to like peer-reviewed journals. I can't go to scholar.google.com or any of that stuff to look for this source because apparently it's fake. Like, it's a creationist source. Like, this dude is just citing nonsense. Let's see what the chat has to say here. Strontium isotope ratios in the outer shelf core date to oldest coral remains to between 490,000 and 1.05 million years old. That estimate is backed up by paleomagnetic data, which show that this portion of the reef must have formed after Earth's magnetic poles last reversed some 790,000 years ago. Interesting. I wonder how the pole reversal would affect us today. Like, what would change for us? We'd have to peel the little red tab off of our compasses and put it on the other side of the needle. Anything else? I don't know. Let's continue listening to Kent Hovind make things up.
If the Earth is millions of years old, why don't we have a bigger reef someplace?
You know what? Let's step back just a little bit now that we've gone on that little excursion to find resources here and see what he said in its full context. Let's listen again.
My daughter and I got to go scuba diving at the Great Barrier Reef. It was incredible. Some of the reef...
Your mom's incredible.
Was destroyed during World War II by ships and anchors and bombs and stuff like that. So the environmentalist wackos went out there to see how fast it grows back. They watched the reef grow for 20 years. It was a government project.
So funny.
After watching it grow for 20 years, they said the reef is less than 4,200 years old.
They straight up didn't say that. I have no idea where he's getting this source from, but I couldn't find it, and it's a creationist source anyways. All I really found was a billion creationist websites citing the exact same source. That's all I really found about it.
Okay, well then I have a question. If the Earth is millions of years old, why don't we have a bigger reef someplace? Why on earth would the biggest reef be only 4,200 years old? I have a theory about that. I bet you know what it is, don't you? Can you figure it out by now? Okay. Here's a picture of Niagara Falls. The textbook says, boys and girls, the rocky ledge above Niagara Falls has been eroding for nearly 9,900 years. Now, how do they know that? Well, the rocks are breaking off the edge. I mean, all waterfalls do that. They break rocks off, and the waterfall eats its way backwards, okay? Flows.
That's what she said.
One direction, erodes the other direction. Niagara Falls is moving back 4.7 feet a year. Charles Lyell went there in 1841 and said, well, Niagara Falls is here. Obviously, it started up here at the cliff by Lewiston, New York. It's moving back down the gully. He said it's 10,000 years old worth of erosion. The people that lived there said, Charlie, it erodes a whole lot faster than you think. One good rainstorm and there's a whole lot of erosion takes place.
Yeah, we know exactly how long rock takes to erode. This is complete nonsense.
He figured 3 feet a year, purposely to make the Bible look wrong. He hated it.
Yeah, see, now he is impugning intentions, or he's claiming that this guy has bad intentions. He was intentionally setting out to prove the Bible wrong, blah, blah, blah. I desperately try not to assume the intentions of anybody. I do it for Kent Hovind, because he's had this explained to him enough times now that he should know better. I don't believe for a second that he doesn't fully understand exactly what he's talking about here. And, I've heard what I believe to be lies from Kent Hovind also. I'm not I think Ken Ham really does believe this stuff. I believe Ken Ham is an honest actor, though an ignorant and naive one. I get the impression that he's an honest one. I don't think that Ken Ham is lying about this stuff. I think he's misinformed terribly, but I don't think he's setting out to deceive people. Kent Hovind, I have to say, it really honestly seems like just a flat-out lie to me.
The Bible. We'll get into more of him on video number 4. Today, Niagara Falls is way back there, split over that island. There's actually 2 Niagara Falls, the Canadian side and the American side. It's eroded back quite a ways just since Charles Lyell's time. The textbook says this gorge that the river runs in, is 7.5 miles long. A simple calculation shows it's been 9,900 years. Oh, it's not that simple. See, Niagara Falls is right here. It started off further north up by Lewiston. If the Earth is millions of years old, why hasn't it eroded back to Lake Erie by now? Why is Niagara Falls right there? I have a theory about that, okay? Now here's my theory. You see,
once again, just making things up. Just say whatever you want and find some BS source for it that was written in an evangelical creationist magazine or something. Anything you can find that supports your crackpot theories that make absolutely no sense.
See, about 6,000 years ago, God made everything, and 4,400 years ago, there was a flood. As the flood water was running off, whoosh, about half of that creek washed out in 20 minutes. So it looks like it took 9,900 years. They forgot the flood. They also forgot to get the right number. It should have been 8,400 had they used 4.7, but what do you expect? Okay. When it rains, 30% of the water runs into the ocean, bringing with it mineral salts. The oceans are getting saltier every day. Today, they're 3.6% salt. They could have done that in less than 5,000 years.
You know what? Let's fact check every sentence. Let's fact check every sentence of this guy. Ocean salt content, 35 parts per thousand, so 3.5%. That's about right. Give or take. I guess it would probably depend on the ocean. Okay, that sentence was seemingly true. Let's continue.
Question. Why aren't the oceans saltier? Well, you see, 6,000...
Wait, what is this? I don't understand. Why would they be saltier?
That in less than 5,000 years, bringing with it mineral salts. Remember, it should have been 8,400 had they used 4.7, but what do you expect? Okay. When it rains, 30% of the water runs into the ocean, bringing with it mineral salts. The ocean...
Okay, mineral salts, from my understanding, are not actually the reason why the oceans are salty. I believe it's because of this chemical reaction that causes the salt. Ocean salt primarily comes from rocks on land and openings on the seafloor. Salt in the ocean comes from 2 sources: runoff from the land openings in the seafloor. Runoff from the land and openings in the seafloor. Rocks on land are the major source of salt dissolved in seawater. Rainwater that falls on land is slightly acidic, so it erodes rocks. Okay, interesting. That one is from NOAA.gov. There is another reason for it. I don't remember what it was now. It's something about a chemical reaction that happens. It mostly comes from land. It accumulates, as rain forms and falls through the air, it accumulates carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, causing it to become slightly acidic. It then flows over the land, eroding rocks and picking up small amounts of salt and other dissolved minerals. At this point, the water is still basically fresh. There's some salt in it, but usually not enough to make it undrinkable. Eventually, most rainwater finds its way to the ocean. Once it gets there, some of the dissolved minerals, such as calcium, are removed from the water by biological processes, but salt tends to remain. Additional salt is contributed by underwater, hydrothermal, and volcanic activity. There you go. I knew there was a chemical process in there somewhere. So basically, all kinds of minerals flow into the ocean, but salt is one of the minerals that isn't really absorbed much by life or used by biological life forms. And as a result, all of the calcium and everything else in the ocean sticks around, but the salt remains. So over long stretches of time, the ocean gets saltier and saltier because every other type of mineral is absorbed and used by biological life forms. That's what causes it.
Oceans are getting saltier every day. Today, they're 3.6% salt. They could have done that in less than 5,000 years.
You know what? I'm curious. Okay, the ocean is no longer getting saltier. This is a source, oceanservice.noaa.gov. It's a government website. That means Kent wouldn't trust it. Oh, no. It says, let's see. It's estimated that rivers and streams flowing from the U.S. alone discharge 225 million tons of dissolved solids and 513 million tons of suspended sediment annually to the ocean. Throughout the world, rivers carry an estimated 4 billion tons of dissolved salts into the ocean annually. About the same tonnage of salt from ocean water probably is deposited as sediment on the ocean bottom, and thus yearly gains may offset yearly losses. In other words, the ocean today probably has a balanced salt input and output, and so the ocean is no longer getting saltier. So what was that you said, Kent? Can you repeat that for me, old buddy?
With it, mineral salts. The oceans are getting saltier every day.
No. And also, if you claim that they were, you're going to have to tell us by how much and how you got there. Are you just going to make claims without any evidence? I mean, of course he is. That's his MO. That's what he does.
Today, they're 3.6% salt. They could have done that in less than 5,000 years.
I looked it up. It's roughly 3.5%, not 3.6. And it depends on... It doesn't... No, it couldn't have done it in less than 5 years. Well, I guess it... Or 5,000 years. It could have, I suppose, technically. But it didn't. We understand the process pretty clearly of exactly how the salt got in the ocean. And at this point in time, the salt input and output in the ocean is roughly equivalent.
Question. Why aren't the oceans saltier? Well,
because the salt input and output are equivalent right now.
You see, 6,000 years ago, God made everything. 4,400 years ago, there's a flood. Now, since the flood's been over, the oceans have gradually gotten saltier.
Wow, that's interesting. So I guess he's claiming that the oceans at one point weren't salty or were not as salty. Is this how he gets around, like, Noah didn't have to bring fish on the boat because the oceans weren't salty yet? They were still freshwater? I'm assuming that's how he gets around it. But then it raises the inevitable question, how did saltwater fish survive? I mean, saltwater and freshwater fish cannot survive in the same environment, plain and simple. So Noah either had to bring saltwater fish or freshwater fish with him on the boat. One or the other. How did that work?
An atheist I debated said, Hovind, could you please tell me how the freshwater fish survived the flood?
Yeah.
I said, sir, aren't you assuming the flood was saltwater?
Okay, then how did the saltwater fish survive it? You can only have one of these. It's like some gotcha, like he thinks he got one over on us. We have saltwater fish, we have freshwater fish. One of them could have survived the flood plausibly. The other could not.
He said the ocean is saltwater. I said, well, it is today, yeah. During the flood, it's probably mostly fresh water, and it's gradually gotten saltier, and today some animals have had to adapt to salt water. And now we have freshwater crocodiles and saltwater crocodiles, and they probably had a common ancestor, a crocodile.
So he's saying he accepts, quote unquote, microevolution, as he calls it. He accepts that animals can evolve to some degree, just doesn't believe that there's a long span of time. I find it interesting that he accepts microevolution, as he calls it. It's not even a real thing, so I refuse to give it any kind of legitimacy. But I find it interesting that he accepts it, because all he needs to get to macroevolution is the millions or billions of years that the Earth has gone through. If he accepts, basically he accepts evolution, he just doesn't accept that the Earth is older than 6,000 years. That's the hang-up here, really. But for some reason, he insists on arguing with evolution specifically. I just do not get it, dude, honestly. My Nana said that salt and freshwater did not mix, because God, obviously, right? Yeah, when they get stuck up against a rock in a hard place and they have no choice but to come up with some ridiculous explanation, when they're faced with their with contradictions, as they usually are, they always say, well, it was just God's doing. God just snapped his fingers and made it happen. Okay, well, why didn't he just snap his fingers and kill everybody and every animal and everything that wasn't righteous to God then? Why did he make Noah, builds this boat and all this other stuff? Why not just snap your fingers and make every bad person have a heart attack? Simple as that. This is all so nonsensical from top to bottom. It's ridiculous.
He said, that's evolution. I said, no, it's not. Going from a freshwater croc to a saltwater croc is a minor change compared to your evolution story. You believe they changed from a rock to a croc.
No, what he's talking about is abiogenesis, not evolution. Coming to exist, the life coming to exist in the first place is abiogenesis, not evolution. There is a distinct difference between the two. What he's talking about, changing over time, that is evolution. He accepts evolution. He just doesn't accept that the Earth is older than 6,000 years. That's it.
Now that's a...
If I were God back then, I would have Thanos snapped all humans away. Well, that would have been the moral thing to do, because then innocent animals wouldn't have died in your horrific purge of the entire planet.
Major change. Okay. From a freshwater croc to a saltwater croc is a minor change compared to your evolution story. You believe they changed from a rock to a croc. Now that's a major change, okay? A friend of mine in Alabama raises...
By the way, it's not a belief. Evolution is not a belief. Don't call it a belief. Evolution is a fact claim. Either it's true or it's not true. It is something that you accept. You either accept it or you don't accept it. You don't believe it or not believe it. So he's not accepting evolution as the fact that it is.
Change compared to your evolution story. You believe they changed from a rock to a croc. Now that's a major change, okay? A friend of mine in Alabama raises fish. He said he took a freshwater fish, black mollies, slowly added salt to their aquarium. In 2 weeks, they became saltwater fish.
Wow, a friend of yours? Some unknown friend who we can't talk to or test or anything? If this was a true claim, I would be willing to bet Kent would have found a scientific article to prove that this is possible. Maybe. I don't know. It's possible that this does work. But the fact that he's quoting some rando here that I've never heard, just a friend of his, tells me it's almost certainly completely made up.
When he put them back in fresh water, they died in 30 minutes.